Good morning. This is Ishani Saraswat. Let me now take you into the world of communication. Have you ever noticed a person sitting quietly and enjoying music? Smiling away? Have you ever seen a boss writing an email? Have you ever noticed a good speaker? Or have you ever seen a small little child conveying something to his mother without words and with the help of gestures? Well, what is all of that? That is communication. The world today requires and needs good communication. It is not possible for us to succeed in our lives till the time we are unable to communicate. In fact, communicate well. So let me now take you into a journey that might help you develop your communication skills better, that might help you become a better personality, and that might help you to solve your problems a bit more easily in life. As we all know, communication comes from a Latin word that is called communicare. Communicare means to impart, to share, or to exchange. In simple words, communication means to exchange ideas. It may be thoughts, it may be an opinion, or it may be sharing of knowledge. Any kind of sharing of knowledge, any kind of exchange of ideas, any kind of exchange of information is called communication. Well, communication just doesn't happen out of the blue. It has something fixed to it. It is a process that follows particular methods, a process that goes through various stages and various steps. Communication begins from the very basic, and the first step towards communication is ideation. I have an idea and I want to convey it to the world. What do? The process of conceiving an idea, the process where you actually decide what do you have to communicate, the process when the thought comes into your mind is called ideation. Ideation is the first step towards good communication. After ideation, what do we have? We have encoding. When we convert our ideas into thoughts, into opinions, where encoding needs what? It needs a medium. Encoding can be of two types. It could be logical or it could be emotional. I want to convey an emotional idea to my mother. I want to tell her something that involves more of my emotions and that is less logical. The same process will be followed for a thing that is more logical and that needs to be conveyed. So encoding is the next step of communication where we actually change an idea into a thought or into words, keeping in mind the medium. Suppose tomorrow the boss has to convey something to a junior member in the team and he wants to convey it over a telephone. What will he do? The idea comes to the mind, let me call up my subordinate and tell him that the file should be on my table tomorrow morning. He picks up the telephone. The idea is already in his mind. He then encodes the message. He puts them into the right words. He picks up the telephone. The telephone becomes the medium. And then thereafter, the message gets transmitted to the receiver or the person who's sitting on the other side of the table, the subordinate. So when the subordinate picks up the phone, the subordinate takes the words that the boss is sending and therefore he starts formulating answers for that. And what is that process? That is called decoding. That is called decoding when a person understands the message and forms a particular code out of it and then starts framing the answer. After the decoding comes the feedback. The feedback is the final and the last step of good communication, and that is the most important step of communication. You may be a wonderful listener, but if you are not giving a proper response and if you're not giving a proper feedback, the process of communication remains incomplete. There is no point communicating with somebody till the time you are unable to communicate and till the time you're unable to give the right feedback. Now, feedback can be in the form of non-verbal communication, where you're simply nodding your head. You may be saying no, you may be saying yes, you may be smiling, or you may be conveying a gesture that shows the other person that yes, you are listening. Feedback is the last step towards communication, and then the message goes back to the sender once again. So are we clear with the process of communication? The sender has an idea and the process is called ideation. Then is transmission. Transmission through a proper medium and then is encoding. After encoding, we have decoding when the receiver receives the message. After decoding, we have the feedback that comes back through a different channel or a medium, and that goes back to the sender itself. Now, communication can be divided into formal communication and informal communication. When we say formal communication, what we mean is communication that follows a protocol. Communication that follows a particular set of rules. For example, all the communication that happens in the offices, all the communication that happens between two seniors professionally dealing with each other is called formal communication. A communication between a teacher and a student is formal communication. And when we talk of informal communication, it is all the communication in the world that we have with our friends, where we actually don't observe the code of ethics, where we don't follow rules, where we do not follow where we do not take care of the language that we need to follow, and where we are talking to somebody informally and more casually. So formal and informal communication. Now, when we talk of communication and the process of communication, after understanding the difference between formal and informal communication, we have various channels of communication. Now, how does communication flow? Communication doesn't flow in all the directions all the time. It has a set channel, and the channels of communication could be upward channel of communication, the downward channel of communication, the horizontal channel of communication, or the diagonal channel of communication. Now, beginning with the very basic channel, the first channel of communication, where the information flows from a higher authority to a lower authority. The CEO of a company calls up the manager of a particular company, the HR manager, and he wishes to talk to the HR manager regarding some issue. That information that follows from a higher authority to a lower authority, that is called downward communication. In downward communication, we have orders, we have instructions, and we have things that need to be followed up. The second channel of communication is called upward communication. Upward communication would mean, suppose a student wants to convey something to the teacher and he wishes to write an email. The student writes in the email requesting him to grant marks or requesting him to grant a particular attendance for a particular subject, as there was a genuine problem because of which he could not attend a particular class. Requests, feedbacks, and the proposals that go up from a lower authority to a higher authority, we follow the upward channel of communication. That is the second channel of communication. The third channel of communication is the communication that goes on between people working on the same level. The hierarchy there is the same. And where I talk to my colleague who is in the same level in an institution, what am I doing? I'm communicating horizontally. The flow of information is the same, and the flow of information is equally divided between people who are working on the same level. That is called horizontal communication. Ideally, these three modes of communication were relevant while working in an organization. But now, because of the introduction of information technology, because of the introduction of so many electronic channels of communication, we have another channel of communication, and that is called the diagonal channel of communication. In the diagonal channel of communication, people bypass hierarchy. They do not follow a particular hierarchy. They do not go order-wise, whether upward or downward. Anybody can communicate with anybody. A subordinate can communicate with the boss. A boss can communicate with another boss and then again get back to the subordinate. That is the diagonal mode of communication. So after discussing the process of communication, after discussing the channels of communication, I think we would be in a position to actually define what communication is. But communication is not just this. Communication is further divided into skills. And what are the 4 skills of communication? Communication would mean somebody who is listening to somebody very carefully, a student who is very carefully trying and listening to a particular teacher. That is a listening skill. And that is very much a part of communication. Then somebody, a speaker who's a prolific, a wonderful speaker speaking on the stage. That is what? That is communication. And that is the second skill of communication. Then we have The reading skills, it is an art to read something wonderfully. The art of oration, the art of reading, that is the third skill of communication. And then in the end, we have the art of writing. A person who can write a flawless email, a flawless letter, and grammatically correct, wonderfully conveyed. What is that? That is an art. And that is a skill actually. And that is again a part of communication skills. So very soon we would be discussing the LSRW skills with you individually and in detail.
Continue.
Now, why do people fail to communicate? I wanted to convey to my boss that because I was unwell, I would not be able to attend office tomorrow. Why was my boss unable to understand that? Was there a barrier in his mind? Was there a problem in understanding? Was I too emotional in my message? Or was the boss just not ready to listen? The reason is that today a lot of communication gets wasted. Why? Because we have miscommunication that is taking place. Communication that should not be miscommunicated. There are various reasons why our information cannot get conveyed properly to a proper person. And the various reasons for that are called the barriers to communication. Now, beginning with the very basic barrier to communication. You have gone out on a rally and you are in the students' union. You are trying to listen to the opposition party and the speaker is trying to speak. But the weather is so hot and humid that you are hardly able to concentrate. What is that? There is heat in the atmosphere. That is the physical barrier. There is a barrier, and that is the physical barrier to communication. The physical barrier would be things that come in as physical exterior barriers so that you are unable to concentrate on the speaker's content. It may also be noise that is coming from outside, the noise of the traffic that doesn't let you study while you're trying to concentrate on your examination. That is a physical barrier. When you're feeling very cold, you're unable to study, you're unable to listen to the person. Again, a physical barrier. After the physical barrier, we have another barrier, and that is called the linguistic barrier. Linguistic is the science of studying a particular language. And when we talk of linguistics, what do we mean? I am a person who knows English and I go into a class where students studying German are sitting and they do not understand English. If I try and communicate with them, what will be the result? The result would be miscommunication. They will hardly be able to understand my language. You must have seen this problem occurring with the tourists who go out and who try to communicate with people. Where there is a language problem, there is a barrier, and linguistic barrier is the second barrier to communication. The third barrier is called the cultural barrier. The culture that differs from one place to another. I am a person who belongs to the Indian culture. If I go to America tomorrow and if I try and teach the students there something about Indian culture that they do not know, there will be a barrier. There will be a lack in understanding, and that is what is the cultural barrier, where people from two different cultures try and interact and they have problems in understanding each other. That is the cultural barrier. The next barrier is called the semantic barrier. The semantics is the word and the meaning that is conveyed. A very common example of the semantic barrier is the word dowry. In India, the word dowry means the possessions, the belongings, the money and the wealth that a girl or a bride gets when she gets married to a boy. Whereas when you talk of the Middle East, the word dowry means the amount of money that a man would bring when he gets married to a girl. So when somebody from India who goes outside and who talks to a person who doesn't belong to the Indian community may understand the word dowry differently. So there is a semantic gap, the gap between the word and the meaning of the word, that is called a semantic barrier. Apart from these barriers, we also have a major barrier, and that is the emotional barrier, or you can also call it the psychological barrier. I am very happy today. I know tomorrow is a weekend. I know I'm going to meet my parents. I know I have no official work to do, and I'm very, very happy about it. And I'm so excited that I'm hardly able to concentrate on anything that is happening around me. Happiness also brings about a barrier in communication, because the amount of concentration that you give to a particular content is divided because you're busy thinking of something else and planning something else. If you're sad and if you're disturbed, your marks have not been good, you were not able to perform well in a particular semester, you're sitting in the class and you're sad, thinking of what has happened to you, why did it happen, so on and so forth. Again, a barrier is created. That is called, again, this is the emotional barrier or the psychological barriers, where these barriers are the ones responsible for miscommunication in this world. I think it is, if we keep in mind that we do have these barriers in our lives, and if we try and overcome these barriers, we would be better listeners in life, we would be better communicators in life. Needless to say, I think by now you have understood how important is communication in today's scenario, how important it is for us to communicate well and not just communicate.